6th.
You also told us about reports of violence and weapons that the Secret Service were receiving on the night of January 5th and throughout the day on January 6th. Is that correct?
That's correct.
There are reports that police in Washington, D.C. had arrested several people with firearms or ammunition following a separate pro-Trump rally in Freedom Plaza on the evening of January 5th. Are those some of the reports that you recall hearing about?
They are.
This one chump went Koo Koo.
The world now knows that the people who attacked the Capitol on January 6th had
Should've
many
been held
different
for
types
treason.
of weapons. When a president speaks, the Secret Service typically requires those attending to pass through metal detectors, known as magnetometers, or MAGs for short. The Select Committee has learned that people who willingly entered the enclosed area for President Trump's speech were screened so they could attend the rally at the Ellipse. They had weapons and other items that were confiscated: pepper spray, knives, brass knuckles, tasers, body armor, gas masks, batons, blunt weapons. And those were just from the people who chose to go through the security for the president's event on the Ellipse, not the several thousand members of the crowd who refused to go through the MAGs and watched from the lawn near the Washington Monument.
Who could still march to the Capitol.
Has learned about reports from outside the magnetometers and has obtained police radio transmissions identifying individuals with firearms, including AR-15s, near the Ellipse on the morning of January 6th. Let's listen.
There's an individual in a tree, maybe a white male, about 6 feet tall.
Fit the description.
He's got blue jeans and a blue jean jacket, and underneath the blue jean jacket, the complainant saw a stock of an AR-15. He's going to be with a group of individuals, about five to eight other individuals. Two of the individuals in that group at the base of the tree, near the porta potties, were wearing green fatigues, green olive drab style fatigues, about 5'8", 5'9", skinny white males, brown cowboy boots. They had Glock-style pistols in their waistband. 8736 with the message to that subject.
Fit the description.
Right hip. He's in the tree. Motor 1, make sure BPD knows they have an elevated threat in the tree south side of Constitution Avenue. Look for the Don't Tread on Me flag, American flag face mask, cowboy boots, weapon on the right side hip.
We got 3 men walking down the street.
Right side hip.
Carrying AR-15, copy at 14th and Independence.
AR-15s at 14th and Independence. As you saw in those emails, the first report that we showed, we now know was sent in the 8 o'clock hour on January 6th. This talked about people in the crowd wearing ballistic helmets and body armor, carrying radio equipment and military-grade backpacks. The second report we showed you on the screen was sent by the Secret Service in the 11 a.m. hour, and it addressed reports of a man with a rifle near the Ellipse. Ms. Hutchinson, in prior testimony, you described for us a meeting in the White House around 10 a.m. in the morning of January 6th, involving Chief of Staff Meadows and Tony Ornato. Were you in that meeting?
I was.
Let's listen to your testimony about that meeting, and then we'll have some questions.
I think the last time we talked, you mentioned that some of the weapons that people had at the rally included flagpoles, oversized sticks or flagpoles, bear spray. Is there anything else that you recall hearing about that the people who would gather on the Ellipse had?
I recall Tony and I having a conversation with Mark probably around 10 a.m., 10:15 a.m., where I remember Tony mentioning knives, guns in the form of pistols and rifles, bear spray, body armor, spears, and flagpoles. Spears were one item, flagpoles were one item, and then Tony had relayed to me something to the effect of, and these effing people are fastening spears onto the ends of flagpoles.
Ms. Hutchinson, here's a clip of your testimony regarding Mr. Meadows' response to learning that the rally attendees were armed that day. What was Mark's reaction, Mr. Meadows' reaction to this list of weapons that people have in the crowd.
When Tony and I went in to talk to Mark that morning, Mark was sitting on his couch and on his phone, which was something typical. And I remember Tony just got right into it. I was like, sorry, I just want to let you know, and had informed him, like, this is how many people we have outside the mags right now. These are the weapons that we're known to have. It's possible he listed more weapons off that I just don't recall. And gave him a brief but and concise explanation, but also fairly thorough. And I remember distinctly Mark not looking up from his phone. And I remember Tony finishing his explanation and it taking a few seconds for Mark to say something, to the point where I almost said, Mark, did you hear him? And then Mark chimed in and was like, all right, anything else? Still looking down at his phone. And Tony looked at me and I looked at Tony and Tony said, no, sir, do you have any questions? He's like, what are you hearing? And I looked at Tony and I was like, sir, he just told you about what was happening down at the rally. He was like, yeah, I know. And then he looked up and said, have you talked to the president? And Tony said, yes, sir, he's aware too. He said, all right, good.
He asked Tony if Tony had informed the president.
Yes.
And Tony said, yes, he had. So, Ms. Hutchinson, is it your understanding that Mr. Ornato told the president about weapons at the rally on the morning of January 6th?
That's what Mr. Ornato relayed to me.
And here's how you characterize Mr. Meadows' general response when people raised concerns about what could happen on January 6th.
So at the time, in the days leading up to the 6th, there were lots of public reports about how things might go bad on the 6th, even the potential for violence. If I'm hearing you correctly, what stands out to you is that Mr. Meadows did not share those concerns, or at least did not act on those concerns.
Did not act on those concerns would be accurate.
But other people raised them to him, like in this exchange, you mentioned that Mr. Ornato pulled them aside.
That's correct.
Ms. Hutchinson, we're going to show now an exchange of texts between you and Deputy Chief of Staff Ornato. And these text messages were exchanged while you were at the ellipse. In one text, you write, but the crowd looks good from this vantage point as long as we get the shot. He was effing furious. And the text messages also stress that President Trump kept mentioning the OTR, an off-the-record movement. We're going to come back and ask you about that in a minute. But could you tell us, first of all,
Sorry
who
about
it
that,
is
but
in
stay
the text
focused.
who was furious?
Y'all know them champions is all trying to be pawns of Satan.
And why was he furious, Ms. Hutchinson?
He was furious because he wanted the arena that we had on the ellipse to be maxed out at capacity for all attendees. The advance team had relayed to him that the mags were free-flowing. Everybody who wanted to come in had already come in, but he still was angry about the extra space and wanted more people to come in.
And did you go to the rally in the presidential motorcade?
I was there, yes, in the motorcade.
And were you backstage with the president and other members of his staff and family?
I was.
And you told us, Ms. Hutchinson, about particular comments that you heard while you were in the tent area.
We were in the offstage announce area tent behind the stage. He was very concerned about the shot, meaning the photograph that we would get, because the rally space wasn't full. One of the reasons, which I previously stated, was because he wanted it to be full. And
Listen to Satan. He kicking and screaming. Get him out of here.
Watch him at the rally.
Should have been in the...
And he felt the mags were at fault for not letting everybody in. But another leading reason, and likely the primary reason, is because he wanted it full and he was angry that we weren't letting people through the mags with weapons. What the Secret Service deemed as weapons and our
Come on, man.
weapons.
You can't make
But when
this
we were in
up.
the offstage announce
Even
tent,
she laughing.
I was part of a conversation. I was in the vicinity of a conversation.
Nervous
where I overheard the
laughter. She
president
couldn't
say
believe
something to
it.
the effect of, I don't effing care that they have weapons. They're not here to hurt me. Take the effing mags away. Let my people in. They can march to the Capitol from here. Let the people in. Take the effing mags away.
You hear him trying to thin out
Just to be clear, Ms.
security,
Hutchinson, is it your understanding
making
that
our
the
country
president
more vulnerable?
wanted to take the mags away and said that the armed individuals were not there to hurt him?
That's a
Not
fair
him, but
assessment.
Pence
The issue
and
wasn't
Pelosi
the amount
and
of
whoever else
space
they
available
found.
in the official rally area only, but instead that people did not want to have to go through the mags. Let's listen to a portion of what you told us about that.
In this particular instance, it wasn't the capacity of our space, it was the mags and the people that didn't want to come through, and that's what Tony had been trying to relay to him that morning. You know, it's not the issues that we encountered on the campaign. We have enough space, sir. They don't want to come in right now. They have
they want to be part of a
don't want
militia, bro.
confiscated by the Secret Service.
They want to
And
be
they're
armed
fine on the mall. They can see you on the
more
mall.
so than come
They want
into
to
your
march straight to the Capitol
that blasted
from the mall.
speech space.
The president apparently wanted all attendees inside the official rally space and repeatedly said, quote, "They're not here to hurt me."
Not him, just us.
And just to be clear, so he was told again in that conversation, or was he told again in that conversation that people couldn't come through the mags because they had weapons?
Correct.
And that people, and his response was to say they can march to the Capitol from the ellipse.
Something to the effect of, take the effing mags away. They're not here to hurt me. Let them in. Let my people in. They can march to the Capitol after the rally's over. They can march from the ellipse. Take the effing mags away. Then they can march to the Capitol.
Ms. Hutchinson, what we saw when those clips were playing were photos provided by the National Archives showing the
She a
president
brave
in the
woman, bro.
onstage tent.
These
before
are
his
both
speech on
brave
the
women.
ellipse. You were in some of those photos as well. And I just want to confirm that is when you heard the president say the people with weapons weren't there to hurt him and that he wanted the Secret Service to remove the magnetometers.
That's correct. In the photos that you displayed, we were standing towards the front of the tent with the TVs, really close to where he would walk out to go onto the stage. These conversations happened 2 to 3 minutes before he took the stage that morning.
Let's reflect on that for a moment. President Trump was aware that a number of the individuals in the crowd had weapons and were wearing body armor. And here's what President Trump instructed the crowd to do.
We're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down. We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here we're going to walk down to the Capitol.
Anyone you want.
And the crowd, as we know,
like,
did proceed to the Capitol.
You about to purge
it soon
him.
became apparent to the Secret Service, including
president,
the Secret
bro.
Service teams in the crowd, along with White House staff,
Not a
the
street
security
thug.
of the Capitol would not be sufficient.
I had 2 or 3 phone conversations with Mr. Ornato when we were at the ellipse, and then I had 4 men on Mr. Meadows' detail with me in between those individuals and then a few other of the bodies on the ground, just the Secret Service staying in advance. They were getting notifications through their radios, and Mr. Ornato in one phone conversation had called me and said, make sure the chief knows that they're getting closer to the Capitol. It's they're having trouble stacking bodies.
Ms. Hutchinson, when you said they were having trouble stacking bodies, did you mean that law enforcement at the Capitol needed more people to defend the Capitol from the rioters?
It was becoming clear to us and to the Secret Service that Capitol police officers were getting overrun at the security barricades outside of the Capitol building, and they were short people to defend the building against the rioters.
Listen.
And you mentioned that Mr. Ornato was conveying this to you because he wanted you to tell Mr. Meadows. So did you tell Mr. Meadows that people were getting closer to the Capitol and that Capitol Police was having difficulty?
After I had the conversation with Mr. Meadows, after I had the conversation with Mr. Ornato, I went to have the discussion with Mr. Meadows. He was in a secure vehicle.
I'm gonna have to break this into 2 parts.
So when I had gone over to the car, I went to open the door to let him know, and he had immediately shut it. I don't know who he was speaking with. It wasn't something that he regularly did, especially when I would go over to give him information. So I was a bit taken aback but I didn't think much of it, and thinking that I would be
What
able
they
to have
call
a
that?
conversation with him a few moments later.
Trying
And were
to
you able
privilege
to have that
information.
conversation a few moments later?
He didn't want her to
Probably
hear
about 20 to 25
what was
minutes
said
later.
to him
There
or
was
what
another
he was
period
going
in
to say.
between where he shut the door again, and then when he finally got out of the vehicle, we had the conversation. But at that point, there
At least
was
a
a backlog
25
of
minute.
information that he should have been made aware of.
And
This
so
is a
you
25
opened
minute
the door to the
conversation.
control car and Mr. Meadows pulled it shut?
That's correct.
And he did that 2 times?
That's correct.
And when you